Hello, and welcome to this edition of the Scales of Justice. I'm District Attorney Tim Cruz. I am the District Attorney of Plymouth County. Joining me today is Joe Janezic. Joe's been an Assistant District Attorney for 15 years. He served the last 2.5 years in Plymouth County and is currently the Chief of the Gang Unit and Community Prosecutions. Prior to joining my staff, Joe served for 12.5 years as an Assistant District Attorney in Suffolk County, prosecuting many cases up in the Superior Court. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing two very important initiatives that have come out of my office: Operation Safe Streets and Project Safe Neighborhood. Operation Safe Streets and Project Safe Neighborhood are multi-agency responses to target gun, drug, and violent crime in the city of Brockton and the surrounding communities. These law enforcement task forces are comprised of local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. Members meet regularly to collect data, share information, and gather intelligence on problem areas and individuals within Brockton and its surrounding community. These initiatives focus on reducing firearm violence in our county through targeted enforcement by removing repeat firearm offenders from our community for as long as possible. Technological advances such as spot shotter are used to improve the investigation and prosecution of criminals. Our technology advances include surveillance cameras, an offender database, which is accessed remotely by laptop computers, cell phones which connect police investigators 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and crime mapping tools used to focus law enforcement resources on the locations where the crime data indicates an increase in activity. So, Joe, welcome to the show. And if we can just kick it right off, I'll ask you the very first question is, what is Operation Safe Streets?
And Tim, thank you very much for having me. So Operation Safe Streets is an initiative that restarted back in 2015. It was in operation up until 2009, and actually in 2015, in June, when it restarted again, the enterprise in Brockton called it, I think I'm quoting them, an important, it was an important response to crime in the city of Brockton. And really what it is, Tim, is a collaboration. It's a dialogue between all the heads of law enforcement in the county and residents, which is huge. So it's been going strong for the last 3 years, and we just had our last meeting, I think, last week. So.
Well, communication is obviously incredibly important between law enforcement officials. Who shows up at these meetings from the law enforcement community to talk about the issues that are going on in Brockton and the surrounding communities that are deeply affected by what occurs in Brockton?
Well, it's really unique. So it is basically the heads of every major law enforcement agency that's operating in the county. So obviously it's headed up by yourself, and there are many attendees from the DA's office, myself included, our first assistant, but then the U.S. Attorney's Office, the FBI, the DEA sometimes appears, the ATF, and then our local police, Brockton Police, a number of branches of Massachusetts State Police, including the Massachusetts State Police Gang Unit, our CPAC Detective Unit that's assigned to our office, and that comprises both the Lieutenant Detective that's assigned to be in charge of our homicides, the Narcotics Unit from the State Police, the CAT team, the Plymouth Sheriff's Department as well, and then the mayor's office as well, and that's just a few. We also have other individuals who come periodically as well.
Well, we also, because we're aware of the fact that the violence, the gang violence or gun violence that occurs within the city of Brockton is not solely targeted for Brockton. Unfortunately, it goes around its boundaries. And we also have seen relationships, and other people that we have come to our meetings are Boston police, because of the connection between Boston and Brockton, the flow of guns and drugs and violence that occur from the city of Boston down there. That's why it's really important to have, I think, the Boston PD, the parole individuals, talking about really the small group of individuals who create the vast majority of crime in any urban community.
That's right, and we have, as you said, beyond that local circle of police, we have a regional circle of police who we are in communication with as well. because there is a flow of individuals who may be gang involved or traffic narcotics all across Massachusetts. And so wherever we can be informed and inform those communities about who is affecting violence, specifically in and around the city of Brockton and in Plymouth County as a whole, we'll do that. So.
Now, you've got a lot of ties from your time in Boston and your time here down in Plymouth, and know a lot of the police officers, and we're often asked questions, is what is the top driver of gun violence in the city of Brockton? Why is there gun violence in the city of Brockton, and where does it emanate from?
What we're seeing is an uptick as it happens with drug activity. So drug markets typically will influence violent activity, and that comes in many different forms, whether it's drug dealers battling for turf, or it's drug dealers being robbed or robbing other drug dealers for their proceeds, for the drugs that they're dealing. And we see that in the form of shootings, we see it in the form of home invasions, violent assaults, all of which is around surrounding the drug markets in Brockton. So.
Well, I mean, I know that while the nation's coming to acknowledge the heroin epidemic, we've known about it, unfortunately, in that city and also in our county for too long a time. We've had too many overdoses, and we've seen a lot of the uptakes regarding fatal overdoses and working together with a lot of different groups trying to drive those numbers down. And the philosophy, I would say, that we've developed in the district attorney's office is to educate our younger kids to make sure we can try to keep them from the drugs and those problems, as well as the gangs, trying to get mentoring programs for kids in the community, and also try to help the people that we can help. But at the same time, we need to continue to go after the dealers and the traffickers who are not drug users, but who are peddling this poison out on the streets, and they're killing people in our community. And now, as we sit here, we're watching our fatal numbers are basically at a standstill. They continue to go up, but they're not worse than they were last year. But what we're also seeing right now is our non-fatal overdoses continues to climb, and that makes it a real challenge.
It does, and with that in mind, our office was just a recipient, as you know, of a major federal grant, at least in terms of honor, dollars, not so much, but you know, we take what we can get. We wrote a grant, our grants department, for targeting specifically what you're talking about, and that is drug-related firearms violence in the city of Brockton. And we did it with what you said in mind. So on one hand, we are targeting individuals who are repeat offenders, who are those people who are the drivers of violence in the community. And the goal with those people who have been given enough chances, who have demonstrated that they are choosing to be a public safety risk, those individuals need to be removed for as long as possible. Those people that involve themselves in violence, firearms, et cetera, those are the folks that need to be removed, and removed for as long as possible. And we have tremendous relationships, both state and federal, that will see to it that those people will be taken out of the community and removed, and not be terrorizing our communities. On the other hand, we wrote the grant with prevention and intervention in mind. And that's hugely important, because we want to save the next generation of kids, not just from becoming addicted to drugs, but also from becoming involved in drug distribution because they see it as the only option. And so we've really focused on the prevention and intervention as part of this grant. And it's called Project Safe Neighborhoods. And we were one of only 4 sites in the entire country to be awarded one of these grants because of I think, the uniqueness, where we tied in the unique problems that we're facing in Brockton. We tied in firearms violence to our opioid market, and we really focused on the prevention and intervention as a cornerstone of this initiative.
Well, the city of Brockton and the surrounding communities have always really come together when we're talking about grants. You know, years back, whether the original PSN, Project Safe Neighborhood, that we had, or Weed and Seed that we had, which is another federal program, or various things that we dealt with, they've really worked together to make sure we can get whatever resources can be done to try to get in front of these problems. And it has been effective over the years. I know that you're proud to say that in 2016, we didn't have any firearm-related homicides in the city or the county. And we had 2 homicides in the county. That's too many, but 2 in the county itself, and that's really unprecedented that we didn't have any firearm violence.
Yep. And those street violence homicides, they are a really good indicator of how we were doing it. For a city of 100 or 120,000 people, to not have a single instance of street violence homicides. So, like you said, in the city of Brockton, committed with a firearm, it was actually between October of 2015 until January of 2017. That's extraordinary. It's an extraordinary story, and I wish more people knew about it. That shows you that something with law enforcement is going very right. But we didn't let up with those community meetings, and in fact, we were telling folks at the time that we need to be constantly vigilant, because even in those times of peace, relative calm, folks have to be vigilant so that we can get ahead of it and prevent the next spike in violence. Law enforcement can only do so much, and we really need community members to be involved.
Well, especially in under-resourced communities like the city of Brockton. It's unfortunate, but by working together and working in conjunction with the state police and all these other federal agencies, they all have an excellent working relationship. And I think that is a good thing, that when something terrible does happen, people should understand that the team works very well together and works really and rows in the same direction to try to get these individuals, once again, the small group of individuals who cause the majority of crime in this city and every city that the crime's occurring in. It makes a big difference to target those individuals and getting them off the streets.
Absolutely, it does.
Now, the opioid problem is incredibly severe right now. And how is that playing our analysis of what we're doing in the Project Safe Neighborhood program?
Well, so we found that a large portion of the drug dealing that's going on in the city of Brockton is opioid related. And so with that in mind, we have really targeted those individuals who are dealing fentanyl, heroin, and other opioids, because not only are they driving violence, but it's fueling overdoses in the county and honestly nationwide, fueling fatal overdoses. Massachusetts, I think in 2016, saw over 2,100 fatalities from opioid overdoses. Our county has, I think, been disproportionately affected by that. And we saw in the city of Brockton that it actually affects the entire county. So of all the overdose deaths in the city of Brockton, I think about 50% were individuals who are not from the city of Brockton. So there are folks coming from outside of Brockton into Brockton to buy narcotics and overdosing in the city of Brockton as well. So.
And we find out a lot of those numbers. I know on the other end of it, our drug abuse task force, and trying to find out and follow the information, the flow of information, having the 27 communities in Plymouth County through Plymouth County Outreach, and all the police chiefs involved in that, they can get data immediately and find out if somebody overdoses in, say, Brockton. However, they may be from Plymouth. They perhaps traveled up there. And so trying to find out when you're dealing with either bad doses of heroin or opiates that are out there, or also whatever other information may be. We see, unfortunately, I think Brockton made some other headlines about a year or two back when we were dealing with one of the first problems of carfentanil. And as you know, carfentanil at that time, unfortunately, was not a violation of the Mass General laws because it was so new. It's carfentanil and fentanyl, synthetic heroin, which comes basically from Mexico and China, which was inundating our streets. And as we sit here now, a couple years later, after the initial batch of carfentanil, last year in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, more than 80% of the fatal opioid overdoses involved fentanyl. So fentanyl is certainly a product that needs to be removed from the street, as well as carfentanil. And I think of the first 10 hits of carfentanil in Massachusetts, 6 of them were in Plymouth County. Right. And that's something that certainly got my attention, and to make sure that we could work and whatever information we can get from Project Safe Neighborhood, from Operation Safe Streets, use that information with other police departments here in our county and other adjoining counties to make sure we can continue to work together to get that stuff off the streets.
Absolutely, and you made a very interesting point. Up until April of this year, carfentanil wasn't illegal. And so we ask our police officers to handle this stuff with, frankly, hazmat suits on. And we've all seen the photographs of that because it's literal poison. You touch a grain of it and it can have severe health consequences, and yet it wasn't illegal until April. So what we see is tremendous cooperation, and it's in the county. You referenced that before. All 27 towns and cities working together, and there isn't a more effective law enforcement tool than that. And it's really a testament to the chiefs and to our office to spearhead that communication.
I'm on the board of the National DA's Association. I'm on their opioid working group, and I talk to prosecutors from across the country. And they are astounded that we actually have a program whereby all of our different local entities talk to each other. They're good men, they're good women, they're very concerned about their communities, and they understand that the way that we're going to get in front of this problem is by continuing to work together to try to get the information that we can, to get the individuals who are selling that stuff off the streets, and at the same time helping the litany of individuals who are going through these problems, which is why in our county now we have 3 different drug courts trying to help individuals and intervene in their problems and still hold them accountable, but get them the help that they need. Because unfortunately in our county, the biggest detox still remains the Plymouth County House of Correction. It's a huge issue.
It's a huge issue, and it speaks also volumes to the fact that our office spearheaded a lot of efforts in terms of that outreach. It's outreach to individuals who you said have an issue, have problems with substance use disorder. And it isn't really an enforcement, a traditional law enforcement role, but it is a role in the bigger picture of saving lives, and that's the goal here, is to save lives. It's not about prosecutions, it's about saving lives.
Yeah, and I think you've seen that in your 15 years. I mean, obviously the role of the prosecutor has certainly morphed since I started back more than 30 years ago. We didn't have any diversion programs for juveniles. We didn't have programs where we would go to the schools and talk to the kids about internet safety issues or underage drinking issues, or doing our mock trial program, or doing our DARE program in the summer, which we do for more than 600 kids for free. Those things, unfortunately, people don't hear about them. But getting on the preventative end of stuff is incredibly important. And now when schools call us up because there have been cuts in local schools and they ask for our help, we've never said no to whatever it may be, and we'll continue to not say no, to try to work together with the limited resources that we're also allocated also. So I think that by working together, eventually I see us getting in front of this. But some people, unfortunately, believe that the problems that we're dealing with may be contained or confined to the city of Brockton, and that's just not true.
No, it's in every single town in our county. We are. No town is immune to the effects of opioids, and I think folks really are aware of that now, and it's everybody's problem.
We see that at our outreach meetings. We see that with police departments that come across the entire county, as well as other adjoining towns. We've had officers from Stoughton, Cohasset, Avon, Norfolk County towns will come in and listen to the Plymouth County issues, because we're all working together on this, and it is crossing these imaginary boundaries of towns and cities, and that we need to stay in front of it.
It sounds incredibly simple, but one of the most effective law enforcement tools that we have to saving those lives is communication, and we're doing it very well. So, without
a doubt, I mean, like I said, I've been DA for a while now, and the most important program that I've seen that we've been involved in over the years, as we go through various federal programs and grants run out and monies are no longer allocated. To me, the one that always got my attention is the one that we just got back, Project Safe Neighborhood, because it's really encouraging to see people who really care about their local communities and try to make sure that they can exchange information as to what somebody who maybe is causing problems in Boston, but they might have an apartment in Brockton, or they might have an apartment in the adjoining community, that they're staying down here but they're causing havoc elsewhere, or vice versa. And that exchange of information, to me, has been critical of trying to put together databases of individuals and information, and how we can work together to try to once again eliminate those small groups of individuals who are causing really a lot of pain in people's lives.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. When Project Safe Neighborhood funding ran out, I think in 08 or 09, you continued the strategy. You continued it without any funding because it was effective. And we continued, the bones of Project Safe Neighborhood were there continually, even when it wasn't funded. So it's a real shot in the arm to get funding back, to actually be able to do a lot more of what we're trying to do. But kudos to the office for continuing that strategy even when there wasn't money to do it.
Well, we also, as a result of Safe Neighborhood, is also now dealing with a relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, and federal courts. Can you tell us a little bit about that relationship that we have with the feds?
So we have, again, a very unique, I think, nationally relationship with our federal law enforcement partners. They are intimately involved in what is going on in the city of Brockton and surrounding communities. They're present and they are working all the time. And we have almost sometimes daily communication with our U.S. Attorney's Office in determining for those repeat offenders who have demonstrated again that they are a public safety risk, where the most appropriate place for them to be prosecuted is. And again, when it comes down to an individual who's demonstrated that they're not looking back and they're going to cause havoc in our communities, the only question is where are they going to be prosecuted and removed for the most amount of time. So we speak with our federal law enforcement partners all the time in that regard. The U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and DEA did a number of wiretaps in our community in 2015 that were tremendously impactful and really were able to provide the resources that, frankly, we in the state don't necessarily have all the time, to dig down into those groups that were causing the violence and then scoop up a large number of individuals under the wiretap statute and prosecute them federally. And it really does move the needle in terms of violence in the city.
Well, as we continue on in dealing with Project Safe Neighborhoods and Operation Safe Streets and working with all these different groups, we're also expanding our initiatives as to which way we're going. And one of the initiatives that we're expanding is not just investigating non-fatal shootings, strike that, fatal shootings, but non-fatal shootings also in the city. Can you describe or tell us about that initiative?
Well, as we were talking about the traditional role of the prosecutor, if you break it down, we could wait for the police to make an arrest and then we just prosecute the case based on what the police have presented us. But we can be much more proactive in terms of investigating incidents, and specifically non-fatal shootings that occur. There are shootings that occur where individuals are hit in the city of Brockton or surrounding communities. And even though there isn't a suspect, and even though there isn't an arrest generated, we have a number of mechanisms that we can use as prosecutors to really try to get at the heart of what is causing that violence, what caused that incident. And we have a kind of a model that suggests that individuals who are willing to shoot a gun will be willing to shoot again and again and again. And many times it is a small amount of individuals in our communities who are driving a vast amount of the violence. And so any information, any evidence that we can gain in terms of trying to solve those unsolved shootings in the city that aren't homicides, but in which somebody is hit, it's important. So we this year have begun to shift forward. Again, it's not something that we're required to do, but it's something that is beneficial for us to do, and I think ultimately benefits the city and surrounding communities. Anybody that's hit by a bullet in the city or in the county, there will be an investigation by a prosecutor. A prosecutor will be assigned and see what else we can do in terms of grand jury or other investigative tools to try to get to the heart of who did that.
I know we're coming near the end of time, but I just want to say that I think that it's fair to say that we're using every tool in the toolbox, whether it be ShotSpotter, NIBIN, ShotSpotter, which is the device which triangulates where the shots come from in the city, so there's an automatic response by the police, because unfortunately we found many times people just didn't show up or make a phone call if it didn't hit their house, their car, their dog, or anybody that they know. So now we're getting a truer read as to where those are occurring, so we have definitive police response to get the shell casings, if there's just casings that are left there, put them into NIBIN, which is the national database trying to find out where those guns come from. And I think it makes a real difference. But I did want to ask you, where do the crime guns in Plymouth County come from? Because we always hear about crime guns and the ones used in crimes. Where do they come from?
Well, so ATF really will do their darndest to try to get at where those guns are coming from via their serial numbers that are on those guns, so they can trace those guns back. And there's a trace that really happens with pretty much every firearm that's recovered in the county. We see about 50% come from out of state. So there are individuals who are trafficking firearms into our community. And what ATF does is analyzes what's called the time to crime. So the shorter the time from the sale of that gun to the time that it's recovered in a crime on the street, the more likely it is that there may be a straw purchaser of those firearms. And if we can get at who made those purchases, then we can identify people who may be moving a large amount of guns into Massachusetts.
And PSN, getting back to the strategy, is unique because of the fact that we're not just focusing on enforcement, correct?
That's right. It is. It's, as I said, it's balanced between enforcement as well as prevention and intervention.
And in some instances, in cases, there may be cases that are not as serious as others. We have diversionary programs, we have reentry programs that we can help people with. We just recently did a Corey-friendly job fair to try to get people jobs back in the community. And we also deal with probation referrals. So we do many different things beyond the fact of what's going on with PSN. And a lot of it's due to the leadership, I think, of yourself and the people in the community that work together to try to get in front of this. So I thank you for your efforts here in PSN and what we're doing here in Plymouth County.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, Tim.
All right, well, I want to thank Joe for joining me here today. It was great information I think, for viewers about Operation Safe Streets and Project Safe Neighborhood. And so I hope you've enjoyed today's show on the scales of justice. If you'd like more information regarding Operation Safe Streets or Project Safe Neighborhoods, please visit our website. You can access it at plymouthda.com. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you again on our next episode.